I sort of stumbled down a rabbit hole on this video. Something that I thought was straightforward sort of like ended up leading to an infinite regression. That's not always a showstopper. A lot of the things we do just in our everyday reality, intellectually they sort of end in infinite regression when you think about it. Definitely we should try to eliminate infinite regression when possible. Main idea of the video is the notion that your principles aren't the starting point that you sort of live your life by. The principles themselves are sort of set by goals that you create. And so the question arises, how do I create those goals? By more principles, and it's an infinite regression, right? But I think in reality, principles are developed by goals that you create that are not really developed by principles, but more intuitions, cultural evolution, and just ideas that you have as an individual. Your genetics might play a role in how you set your goals too. Over time, as you grow, your intuitions become more clear and you set more definite goals, and your principles become more coherent and defined. The foundation of all of it is consequentialism. You can't even think about the stuff. You can't even exist without looking at your reality and seeing what happens after you cause something or after other people cause something. You'll develop your intuitions by watching the effects of causes. There's a lot of circular causation that happens after you cause something in reality that changes you to take an intuition in about what happened, and so the next time you make that choice, you have that feedback loop going, as opposed to the first time you saw it or the first time you ever had to make that kind of decision. So observed consequences leads to the questioning of principles, which then might lead to the questioning of your goals. And then at some point, we have the question everything people. Now, if you're not careful with question everything, that's going to lead you right back to relativism, because question everything in itself is a relativistic mantra. The real, true, pragmatic quote and the real goal with question everything should be question everything until you're completely free of unconscious bias from cultural imposition or genetics or any of that. Create the situation by where there's no influence on you, then set your goals and principles after that. You may then coincide with the things that your parents taught you, the things your peers insisted upon, but you may not. And the point is that it's your choice and you're taking responsibility for who you are. As long as you're not taking responsibility for who you are, you're following what other people tell you, you've got deep ingrained nationalism, deep ingrained religious backgrounds that cause a lot of unconscious factors. You may say that you choose this, but it's hard to really get behind the integrity of the notion that you've chosen something that you've been a part of the whole time. You have to separate yourself from it and re-choose it. That's what I think. I think you can never be fully objective unless you can step completely aside, look at all the options available, and then re-choose that thing rather than having just continued it from the time that you were a child. There's people that aren't principled at all. So there's a range. There's principled, not principled, people that don't even think about it. Goal-driven and principled can lead anybody down any road depending on what your goal is. So being principled or having integrity doesn't always produce good outcomes. I mean, you could, like we see out in the world, be an extremist individualist, obsessed with subgroup separation, and your subgroup might be only a group of 5 people, which would lead you to believe that you were goal-driven and had integrity, but your end goal is to slaughter everybody but 5 people, right? So when people say they're goal-driven and they have integrity, it's all about what that goal is. And if you say it's relative, that's a bit like just putting a blindfold on and ignoring the consequences of actions. In philosophy, principles are foundational concepts or starting points that serve as the basic conditions or rules for understanding, explaining, or evaluating reality, thought, or action. They may be ontological, about being in existence, epistemological, about knowledge, ethical, about what's right and good, logical, about reasoning. So some key philosophical principles are principle of non-contradiction. A thing cannot both be and not be at the same time in the same respect. Principle of sufficient reason. Everything that exists has a reason or cause. Principle of identity. A thing is what a thing is. A equals A. First principles like the uncaused cause, everything can't be contingent, and moral principles, ethics, do no wrong. So the goal of this video is just to highlight the idea that your principles are not actually your starting point. You set goals and develop the principles by evaluating the causation that happens from the principle and how that adds to meeting your goals. And so your goals can be horrendous, okay? You can have horrible goals that slaughter the entire world, and you might think that's great, and you could still say you have principles and integrity in a general sense. This is basically why people are so against psychopathy. So I just kind of like went to AI and had it list the top 5 psychopath tendencies, and it's just what everybody thinks it is. So instrumental efficiency. Since others are viewed primarily as tools rather than moral agents, principles would focus on maximizing personal advantage through others. Dominance and control. Never reveal genuine vulnerability. Always have leverage over those you depend on. Also establish hierarchies where you occupy the superior position. Adaptability without consistency. Since long-term relationships and reputation matter less, principles might emphasize flexibility. Adopt whatever persona serves the immediate situation. Commitments are only binding when convenient. Risk-reward calculation. Principles centered on avoiding consequences rather than moral considerations. The wrong action is the one that gets caught. Or maintain a cost-benefit analysis for all social interactions. So you budget your interactions with people. This sounds very much like a certain president. So we're not all like delusional and reactively political. The substance of the opposition to the current Republican president is something that has been built over hundreds of years in observing destructive behavior, and that behavior is called destructive and known as destructive and known as evil, okay, for lowest common denominator language. It's known as evil because it destroys human life. It's not out to preserve life itself. It uses subgrouping and filtering to destroy everything that's not exactly like itself in particularity, right? It goes against necessity for unnecessary reasons, ideologues. So basically the psychopathic principles are never reveal genuine weakness, all relationships are transactional, maintain multiple exit strategies, adopt a persona to maximize advantage, the ends justify the means as long as there's no negative consequence. So in the end, I think our goals are set by 3 basic things, and then the principles are set by the goals. Basically, it's your genetics, your upbringing and culture. Everything else falls under self-education. While there's not an unremarkable amount of people who exhibit psychopathic tendencies, it's a small number of us who slip down the rabbit hole to extremes. I will say that numbers do show that in business, the number of people that are in leadership roles, psychopathic tendencies are a higher percentage than they are in the general population. Although the percentage is not that much. I think it was something like 5% in the total population, and then it was 8% in business. So it's like an elevated amount, but not that much, which could have been attributable to the testing. But to me, really anecdotally, it just seems like dealing with management roles, and I'm a manager myself. When you become a manager, you sort of have to take on psychopathic, not maybe a sociopathic traits or sociopathic numbness in order to deal with the barrage of nonsense that you have to deal with on a daily basis. Because people hate management for no reason at all, no direct reason. They just hate management because there's some jealousy involved. You never know what they know, so they think that you're worthless. It should be them doing your job. Psychopathic tendencies are developed out of the need to survive the bullshit from the people that just shovel it over because of their conditioning, you see. And that conditioning is something that they should check. Like, so this is a good example of the problems that I'm talking about, is that people at the ground level should become managers for a while and do the job. You have to do it well to really come to the realization that it's necessary, and that you don't have to know the people's jobs on the ground. But once you've done that for a while, you start to realize how stupid you were, hating on management so much. And I'm talking about pragmatic management, not like the crazy real psychopaths who don't care whether they know anything, that just are, entitled, like entitled CEOs, like any CEO that pays somebody and then takes credit for their work just because they paid them. That's a psychopathic tendency, right? Somebody who's okay with taking credit for things even though they didn't do it, and also doesn't care about the consequence to the person who actually did the creation. Okay, so but I can see how in business being psychopathic for management is something that would happen as an effect of the cause coming from the lowest common denominator whipping post principle, let's call it, where everybody hates management just because they're management. So what do you guys expect? You don't like your managers. Nobody likes their managers. Well, you did that, or you did a good portion of it. And like I said, we need to consciously, objectively clear ourselves of these imprints that we've had when we were younger, by our peer groups, by religious, cultural influences, nationality, race. We need to think more objectively in developing our goals. And honestly, that kind of thinking will lead you to universality. So just think about the idea that your principles are developed by the goals you set. If just getting into it, or you want to understand for yourself better, I promise that universality will reward you in the long run. Human necessity is what all of our lives should revolve around, to be good. All humans need the same things to survive in a limited system. You'll survive better if you cooperate and get along with those around you. I think anybody that argues against this is, they may be sincere, but they're not. When I say genuine human beings, I mean in being the thing that they are, with no choice, the deterministic aspect of their humanity that they had no choice over. That's the extent of their humanity. When everything else, all the causal factors, all the choices that they make are to delete or suppress everybody around them. On the identity side of things, they are either not human or anti-human, or some amount in the middle, depending on the situation. So do your best not to become anti-human, and don't let particularity subvert universality. Don't let subgroup identity become more important than what you are before you're even alive to choose. The deterministic aspects. Don't allow identity roles to destroy the deterministic aspect, your deterministic humanity. That's what you need to respect. That's respecting God, okay? Respecting God is respecting life. I don't believe in God, okay? You could talk to me about an alien intelligence that created the world. I'll be more receptive to that because it's not loaded with mysticism and insistence on faith. Let's talk about an alien that created life on Earth as a simulation, a sort of civilization game. And maybe they played it for a while and went, like a lot of us do, and left it in their game stack and left it running, and here we've just been going on for whatever, maybe they have rules against destroying the game because it's got real life in it. But anyway, then we could talk about creation free from God. If you guys like this kind of philosophical subject matter, help us out by liking the video